Now, if you don't know who Dave Ramsey is, he's pretty much the most famous personal finance guy in America. You know, millions of followers, decades of advice, and he has a very strong opinion on one thing in particular, and that is debt. Dave hates debt.
If you could borrow $1 billion, 0% interest for 10 years, would you do it?
No.
No?
Why?
Easy question?
No question.
Even though you could put it in treasuries and pay it off after the 10 years. You could lock in 10-year treasury right now, 10% or 5%.
No.
It's not worth it.
No. I don't borrow money.
Doesn't matter what kind of debt. Credit cards, car loans, buy now, pay later, all of it. In his view, all of it is a trap. And honestly, in principle, I don't really disagree with him. The idea that you should live within your means and not owe money to these large institutions that profit off of keeping you poor, that makes sense to me. I think that's a good rule to follow. But the thing is, with Dave's advice of not having any debt, I really wonder if now this is usable for the average person in 2026. So just to set the stage, let's look at his advice for buying a home. Dave says that when you buy a home, your mortgage should not be longer than 15 years, and your monthly payment should not exceed 25% of your take-home pay. Sounds reasonable, right? But let's see how that actually looks in the real world. The average home price in the Greater Toronto Area right now is $1,069,700. To pay that off in 15 years, your monthly mortgage payment would be $8,370. And according to Dave, that should represent no more than 25% of what you take home. So do the math. If $8,370 is 25% of your monthly income, you need to be taking home $33,483 per month. That's $401,000 a year after taxes. And that monthly payment, I'm not even including mortgage insurance, property taxes, or the size of your down payment. That's just the mortgage itself. So the point stands. If you follow Dave Ramsey's advice, you will never, ever own a home in Toronto. Maybe not even in Canada. So what does he say about cars? Because at least with cars, the math might be a little more realistic, right? Let's find out. Okay, so Dave has a pretty clear framework for how to buy a car. I've gone through a lot of his content and I'm going to present you with the main rules he follows. Rule number 1, no new cars unless your net worth is greater than $1 million.
The reason we teach not to buy a new car unless you're a millionaire is this exact reason. 1/4 of your net worth is going to be worth nothing in 5 years.
Right.
That's the problem with buying new trucks. I mean, if you're worth $1 million, you can afford to lose 50 grand. If you're worth 200,000, 50 grand is a lot of your life.
Okay, I like this one. Most new cars, the minute you drive them off the lot, they lose a chunk of value. Everyone knows this. Most personal finance guys would agree with this. So yeah, I'm good with this one. Point to Dave. Rule number 2, do your research before you buy.
People impulse a big purchase like a car. That makes you stupid. You don't impulse that. You study that. Go on Trader.com, go on Kelley Blue Book and Edmunds.com and look up stuff about the car. Google the car. Read articles about the car. Look at different versions of the car, different packages that are on the car. The luxury package, the standard package, the 2-door, the 4-door, the different engines that are in that particular car. Learn all about a Honda Civic if you're going to buy a Honda Civic.
Yeah, obviously. Know what you're buying, know what it's worth, know what common problems it might have. No argument here. Another point to Dave. Rule number 3, pay cash.
Now, most of the time paying cash means that you are doing a bank transfer, but sometimes you can walk in with the cash and just lay it on the table. It's not that much money. I mean, $7,000, $10,000, $15,000, whatever. It kind of blows a dealer's mind, but certainly if you're buying from an individual, when you put cash on the table, it says we have a deal. It doesn't say, oh, I need to check with my banker.
Here's where it starts to get complicated. You have to buy everything in cash. If you don't have the cash, you can't afford it, you can't buy it. No leasing, no financing, no car payments. We'll come back to this one. Rule number 4, the value of the car should not exceed half your annual income.
Now, if you make $15 million a year and you lose 50 grand on a car, it's not a problem. But if you make 50 grand a year and you lose 25,000 on a car, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so it holds back your wealth building when you've got items that you own that go the other direction. That's where the principle comes from of don't own too much stuff that's going down in value and then wonder why you're broke.
So if you earn $60,000 a year, you should not buy a vehicle that's more than $30,000. This is a good rule. It provides some guardrails and it stops people from buying an $80,000 truck when they make $50,000, which honestly happens quite a bit. But there is a catch. Again, we'll come back to this one. Rule number 5, do not buy a car that is going to be expensive to work on.
Even if you got a great deal on it, you don't buy an old Mercedes. It's going to be very expensive to work on, okay? You buy a plain Jane Ford, Chevrolet, Honda, something that's easy to work on, Toyota.
As someone who loves heavily depreciated luxury cars, this is a rule that hurts the most, but it's smart. There's an old saying that if you can't afford a new German car, you definitely can't afford a used one. So stick with the known reliable brands, Honda, Toyota, Subaru. If you want a bit of luxury, maybe Acura or Lexus, but I completely agree with Dave here. Another point for him. Last rule, rule number 6, cheap cars under $5,000 only need to last you 1 year.
I can only tell you what I would do in your situation. You painted yourself into a really difficult corner because you saved absolutely no money and you didn't carry collision insurance, which you should have been doing both of those things. I'd take $1,000 of my $1,200. I'd take $1,000 out of the check that's coming Friday, and I'd buy a $2,000 car. I would drive that for 2 to 3 months. Meanwhile, I'm going to save like a crazy man and buy an $8,000 car. And I want you to work like a freaking maniac, like every hour they will give you.
The idea here is that the cheap car is just a temporary solution. It's a stepping stone, not a destination. So in theory, this is a great solution for someone with no savings, in theory. All right, let's actually apply these rules to the average working person and see what we come up with. The average salary in Canada is $68,700, but averages are misleading because high earners pull the number up. The median salary, the one that actually reflects what most Canadians earn, is closer to $47,000. So if you're earning $47,000 and you're following Dave's advice, you should not buy a vehicle that's worth more than $23,500. Now, I want to be fair here. $23,500 actually gets you some pretty good cars. There's reliable SUVs, cars, trucks. Yes, they do have some miles on them, but for 23 grand, it's not nothing. But here's a problem that Dave's advice never seems to address, at least I don't see it, is that how many people earning $47,000 have 23 grand sitting in a savings account? Because remember, you can only pay for the car with cash. Let's go over some numbers from Statistics Canada. For Canadians under 35, the average savings are about $27,400. For the 35 to 44 bracket, it's $23,700. And for 45 to 54, it's $39,800. But those are averages across all income levels. When you narrow it down to people earning under $50,000, which is most of the people we're talking about, Statistics Canada found that these individuals generally experience what they call net dissaving, meaning on average, their cost of living exceeds their income. They're not saving money. They're just pulling from whatever they have or going into debt to cover their expenses. So for the average Canadian who Dave's advice is supposedly helping and the person who needs the help the most, $23,500 for a car is just not an option. Like, it's not even close to an option. So what is that person supposed to do? According to Dave, that person is supposed to buy a cheap car, something under 5 grand, and it should only last a year. Remember rule 6? Well, I tried that. Let's see what happened. Full disclosure, I don't have $23,000 where we could just go to a dealership and see what we can find to fit that rule for Dave Ramsey's advice. I just don't have that. But I was able to buy 2 cars, one for $5,000 and one for $500, that both satisfy Dave Ramsey's rule of buying that cheap car that only needs to last a year. So on paper, these are smart financial decisions. You know, there's no debt, paid in cash entirely, but I don't think they're that smart. Let's take a look. This is the first one, 2004 Infiniti G35, have the flag on the hood there to support Team Canada in the World Cup. But this was $500, and it actually looks pretty good. Now, for those Infiniti diehards out there, what wheels are these from? Because I know these are not the OEMs for this G35. I'm thinking G37, but I don't know. Let me know. Let's take a look at this thing. When you open the door to go inside, it's actually not bad. I mean, the seats are pretty good. There's a rip up here, but the interior is really not bad at all. I had to buy a shift knob right there because it didn't have one. Battery is completely dead. So if you bought this car with your last $500 or your only $500, just to put a battery in it, just to change that, to turn it on, you're almost doubling your cost. I know batteries aren't $500, but it's going to be at least 200. And that's so far from everything else that this car needs. Because the battery's dead, let's see if I can put this in neutral with one hand. There we go. Listen to this. Hear that? Oh yeah. That sounds healthy. I don't even know what that is, but there's more. This is where it's just GG for this car. This rust, and I've never even seen this before. So if someone could explain, did they just rust repair the entire bottom of this vehicle? Like, I've never seen this on doors. I don't even know what's happening here, but look at this. Look at this rust. Like, it's horrible. First, we're leaking oil right there, but look at this. Let's see, get the camera under there. There's a hole. There's a hole in the frame. Like, is this what you want someone to be driving with their only $500? Would you want your wife or your child to drive something like this? Or even better yet, would you rather be debt-free, but they drive a car like this, or they have a safe car, but you're in debt? Like, it's such a no-brainer for me. Well, Lucas, you just picked a bad car. You know, you got a bad one. There's good cars out there. Okay. You show me a good car for $500. I'll tell you, it doesn't exist. They're all going to be like this. And yes, this could be fixed up for a couple $1,000s, but then it's not a $500 car anymore. All of a sudden, you're into the thousands of dollars. So let's look at the next one, because I did spend a couple grand on it. Actually, I forgot to mention this car right here. It already has 267,000 kilometers on it. So how much more life does it have? Yes, I guess I get that Dave Ramsey says it only has to last a year, but if I put 2 or 3 grand into it to make it drivable, I should get more than a year out of it, because you're putting that money into an old car. You want to get some value out of that, but I just don't see the point in that. Anyways, here is our next purchase. This is a 2002 Lexus RX 300, and you've seen it before. Obviously, I did a whole video series wrapping it, but guess what? We're running into some issues. So we paid just over $4,000 for this car, and inside, look at that. Really nice leather, you know, pretty clean. This one has 232,000 kilometers on it, so not terrible. The back is in pretty good shape too, but I had to change all the door lock actuators. They weren't working. I had to change the antenna. That wasn't working. And at the dealership, I think they quoted like $800, $900 a door to change the door lock actuator. So you do the math. 800 times 4, $3,200 on a $4,000 car. Like, you know, I changed all the parts. Were like, I think I spent like $60. It was under $100 for all that. But like, it's just crazy how quickly these can become money pits. And on top of all of that, the engine's starting to make noise. I think it needs a timing belt. And even if you're not a mechanic, you know that that is not a cheap repair. So on something that was already pretty cheap, relatively, would you pay for an expensive repair like that? So if it's a $4,400, $4,500 car, would you pay, you know, $1,200, $1,000 to do the timing belt? I wouldn't. Not with 230,000 kilometers. It doesn't make sense to me. And I'm into cars. I like cars. I enjoy this stuff. But if you're not into cars, if you're just someone who wants transportation, get from A to B, I can't imagine the stress that this would be causing you to live through this stuff. Now I understand people use that excuse, you know, I don't want any repairs. They use that to justify them going out and spending $80,000 and getting a brand new car. That's not what we're talking about. Obviously, I don't think that's a good idea. But I also don't think it's a good idea to go out and buy a car like this if you need reliable transportation. To me, the advice, Dave Ramsey's advice, is just outdated. A few years ago, 5, 10 years ago, you could go out, you could buy a really cheap car, $1,500, $2,000, maybe even $500, and you could get a car that would last 6 months to a year. I agree with that. But again, like most of the stuff that he says, to me, it's just outdated. Here's the thing. If you follow Dave Ramsey's rule 6 of buying a cheap car, maybe you'll get lucky and you'll get a good car. But he doesn't address the risk that you're taking on by buying these cheap vehicles. When you buy a $500 car or even a $5,000 car, you are buying someone else's problem. You don't know what's wrong with this vehicle or why it's priced so low in the first place. And odds are it is going to break down or at least need some repairs at some point, obviously, because it's going to be really used. But the problem is, how are you going to pay for those repairs when, remember, you have no money because you use whatever little savings you had to buy the car in the first place? This is the part of Dave Ramsey's advice that I think is just genuinely incomplete. This strategy, this cheap car strategy, assumes you're starting from a place of some stability. Maybe you have an emergency fund. Maybe you have a family member that can help you if things go sideways. Maybe you have a second vehicle that you can use if something happens with this one. But what if someone has none of that? What if someone needs this car to get to work tomorrow morning and can't afford a single day of this vehicle being in the shop? What about that person? What is that person supposed to do? For that person, the cheap car is not a stepping stone. It's not a solution. It's a trap. So what is the actual answer? What should you do if you need a car and you don't have the savings to do it Dave's way? Look, I'm not going to pretend that there's a clean answer because this is real life. There's not easy solutions for everything. But I think for a lot of Canadians, taking on debt is just a practical reality of life now. It is not a moral failure. If you need a reliable vehicle to go to work, to pick up your kids, to function as an adult in a country where public transit isn't always available, sometimes the math just forces your hand. What I do think Dave gets right is the mindset underneath the rules. Stop trying to impress people. A vehicle is just a tool to get from A to B. It should not signal your wealth or your success to other people, to friends, to family, or to even strangers. It is not used for that. The more you internalize that, the better your financial decisions will be. Save what you can, try to build an emergency fund so one small repair doesn't send everything sideways. And if you're in a position to pay cash or to pay off the loan early, do it. The problem with Dave Ramsey's advice isn't the philosophy. It's that the philosophy assumes a starting point that a lot of people just don't have. And when you hand people a set of rules to, help them manage their money, but it's impossible for them to do so, it feels condescending and honestly makes them feel worse about their current situation. Anyway, let me know what you think of Dave Ramsey's advice. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, and as always, thanks for watching.